welcome back to another episode of Bengal Bites, your home for real, raw, unfiltered talk about the Cincinnati Bengals and the NFL. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 16. This is the Week 6 preview, where the Seattle Seahawks come in at 3-1 to take on the Cincinnati Bengals at 2-3. Game's going to be at 1 o'clock this Sunday on CBS. If you're brand new to this show, go back and check out episode 0 where I explain who I am, what this show is all about. But pretty much, I'm a huge football fan, football lover, podcast lover, and I wanted to make a Bengals podcast that was the best Bengals podcast, essentially. I listen to a lot of Bengals podcasts out there, and I wanted to make the most complete, most detailed, most accurate, most exciting Bengals podcast out there. So hopefully you agree. If you disagree with me, tell me which podcast you think is better, what they're doing better. How can I improve my show to beat the competition? All right. So help me out. Leave me a comment, subscribe, follow, rating, do all that stuff. But give me some feedback. Tell me how I'm doing with this show so far. If you got the last episode, episode 15, that was where we did a complete, comprehensive breakdown of the Bengals' win out in Arizona against the Cardinals. The two biggest takeaways from that game were, number one, Joe Burrow looked like the Joe Burrow that we had seen in previous seasons. He looked back to his old self pretty much. I'm not going to say 100% Joe Burrow was back, but let's say 95% Joe Burrow was back. And that, 95% Joe Burrow is way better than anything we had seen previously this season. We had been seeing like 60 or 70% Joe Burrow. So this was a step in the right direction, make us feel like when Joe Burrow says it's going to keep getting stronger, keep improving, maybe that's true. Maybe there is some reason for optimism the rest of this season. It's not all lost. So going into this game, the anxiety is lower in terms of worrying about Joe Burrow's calf and his health. Everything seems to be on the right track, on the road to recovery, so that is a little bit less in our mind. One other thing we don't have to worry about is Ja'Marr Chase. He had said he's always open when they asked him if he had any trouble getting open because Joe Burrow has to catch and throw so quick. Well, he said it doesn't matter because I'm always open, and he proved that even though Joe Burrow was able to hold on to the ball a little bit longer last week, Ja'Marr Chase showed it doesn't matter what defenses try to do to him, he can get open no matter what. He ended up having 15 catches for about 194 yards and 3 touchdowns on 19 targets. And he said in the media this week that he had a couple drops, or he considered himself to have dropped a couple of those. So should have been 17 or 18 maybe. Now the NFL record for catches in a game is 21 by Brandon Marshall. So he's still got a little bit of a ways to go to get to the NFL record, but for a Bengals franchise record, he's got that one. And after a performance like that, not too much of a surprise that Ja'Marr Chase was named the AFC Offensive Player of the Week. So that's like an award that he's gotten a few times in his career, but DJ Moore was the receiver for the Bears, who also had a huge night. He went for 3 touchdowns on 8 catches and had about 225 yards. So DJ Moore and Ja'Marr Chase were the NFC and AFC Offensive Players of the Week last week. Now for the Bengals coming into this game, they're 2-3. They're feeling a little bit better than they did going into last week's game. Last week was a must-win game. The reporters asked Joe Burrow, is it must-win? He said, yes, it's must-win. And then all the players and coaches on the Bengals followed suit. They said, Joe Burrow is the leader of our team. He said it's must win. That means it's must win. But every game from now on, pretty much, you can't say every game is a must win, but how many times can you get yourself psychologically and mentally amped up and ready to go thinking, this is it, this is do or die, must win? At a certain point, you start to get a little burned out. So you can't approach every week, every single game as this is it, do or die, must win, or we go home. There's got to be some of it's got to be like, okay, this is a regular game. We still want to win, but this is a regular game. So you still, like they say, you have to go 1-0 every week. That's what they're going to try to do this week. And part of the reason last week was a must win was, like I said, the Cardinals were one of the worst teams in the NFL. So if they couldn't beat the Cardinals, they probably weren't going to beat anybody. So if they were going to beat anybody, it better be the Cardinals. That's why it was must win. We really need to beat these guys. They're bad. And Jamar Chase even said that in one of his interviews in the locker room this week. They were asking him about the Seattle's defensive backs, guarding him. What does he think about that matchup? And he said, yeah, they look pretty good. It's not going to be as easy as it was against the Cardinals. So he even came out and said, playing as, it's after the game where he already broke the records and had 3 touchdowns. So he can say that. But he was even admitting, playing against the Seahawks isn't going to be as easy as it was playing against the Cardinals. So the Bengals have another matchup on their hands. They got to step up in competition from the Cardinals to the Seahawks. Just because they felt good about beating the Cardinals, they know that it's a different beast coming to town this weekend. And whereas the Bengals have won their last 2 out of 3, Seattle has won 3 in a row. However, they're coming in off a bye week. Seattle had their bye week last week, week 5, but weeks 2 through 4, they won. Now, they lost their first game at home to the Rams 30-13, and the Rams are a team that the Bengals beat. In terms of common opponents, maybe the Bengals have the one up there. The Seahawks, even though the Seahawks have a better record, the teams that they beat weren't especially good, except for the Lions. The Seahawks beat in week 2, and the Lions look pretty good. They got that win over the Chiefs. They're looking pretty strong so far. I think they're 4-1. So you would say Seahawks, they beat the Lions, but then they beat the Carolina Panthers, who are the only winless team in the league so far. They're 0-5. And then in week 4, the Seahawks beat the New York Giants, who only have 1 win, look also like one of the worst teams in the league. The Seahawks had 11 sacks against the Giants. They had 10 on Daniel Jones and then had another one on one of the receivers, like it was a receiver pass. But anyway, they had 11 total sacks. So that lets you know right there that the Seahawks don't mess around with their pass rush. Linebackers, defensive ends, safeties, people coming off blitzes. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Joe Burrow. We can count on that. But from a strictly Bengals perspective, maybe the most interesting thing, or it's not really that interesting because it involves Zach Taylor, but Zach Taylor's first regular season game that he coached for the Bengals, first regular season head coach game in 2019, was a loss to these same Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. It was a close game. I think John Ross might have scored a touchdown in that game, and we were looking at that game as Zach Taylor's first game, like, hey, this is, even though they lost, it was a close game. Offense looked pretty good, scoring a lot of points. Sign of good things to come, right? Well, then they went ahead and lost 11 in a row. That was the first of 11 losses, and they ended up going 2-14 that season. So it was not a good sign at all, but that's why they were asking Zach Taylor about that this season. He's like, I don't even really, think back to that game. He probably tries to, forget anything that ever happened in 2019, just put it out of his mind completely, act like it never happened. So 2019 is just a distant memory in Zach. He doesn't even remember losing that game. And really, there weren't too many players on the team now that were on the team. Maybe Tyler Boyd, and can't think of too many others who are still on the team. There's been so much roster turnover with the last few seasons that I don't think any of the Marvin Lewis era guys are still around. So there's not really a lot of shared history between these two teams anymore. And that's the thing is, players in the NFL are so young. The average career is only 3 or 4 years. So if you haven't played a team in 5 seasons, most likely most of the players from both teams are going to be completely different. But speaking of roster turnover, one of the things that's interesting about the Seahawks was they had a lot of turnover in their roster, and their roster is constructed much differently than a lot of other teams in the NFL because of the fact that they traded away their star quarterback, Russell Wilson, who had been with them for almost a decade. And he was one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league just because he had got one contract extension and then another contract extension. And the contracts for quarterback salaries kept going up and up and up. So you've got Russell Wilson, even though he was still playing at a pretty high level, he kept getting these huge contracts and not really playing up to that. He was getting a top 5 quarterback salary, but he wasn't really playing like a top 5 quarterback. So it was one of those situations similar to the New England Patriots, where you had a legendary longtime head coach in Pete Carroll, and a star quarterback who both had success together. And the question was, is it the quarterback or is it the coach? Is it the system that the coach has implemented, or is it just the quarterback who's making the team so good? Well, Pete Carroll said, hey, it's my system, it's my team. Russell Wilson really isn't that good, so they traded him to the Broncos. They gave them 3 players, 5 draft picks in exchange for Russell Wilson and 1 draft pick. And since then, Russell Wilson has gone completely down the tubes for the Broncos, and the Seahawks have been cashing in on those trades. It wasn't just draft picks, but really high draft picks. The Seahawks got 2 first-round draft picks, 2 second-round draft picks, some other draft picks. But it was made better by the fact that Russell Wilson played so poorly. He moved those first-round draft picks up into the top 10 and top 5. So the Seahawks were able to draft much better players than they were probably anticipating. They probably thought Russell Wilson was probably going to be at least okay, and their first-round draft picks would be somewhere in the middle. But as it turned out, Russell Wilson was horrible, and those draft picks were amazing. So because of this fact that they got rid of Russell Wilson's huge, bloated contract, they got that off the books, that meant they had more freedom to distribute their salary cap money around more evenly to other positions instead of quarterback. So the thing that's interesting about the Seahawks is their highest paid player is not a quarterback or a offensive lineman or even a wide receiver. Their highest paid player is a safety on defense. Their strong safety, Quandre Diggs, counts the highest against their salary cap. It depends on which one you look at, but he's close, and then DK Metcalf, their wide receiver, is number 2, but their top 4 highest paid players are safeties and wide receivers, not quarterbacks, not defensive ends or anything like that. So it's a little bit strange. And the reason is they got Geno Smith at quarterback, who seemed like he was destined to be a backup for his entire career, backed up Russell Wilson the last few years that he was around. And then when Russell left, they got a chance to see Geno Smith when Russell Wilson got injured for a few games. He was like, hey, this Geno Smith, he's still pretty good. They ended up making him their starting quarterback last year. They got all the way to the playoffs. Geno got to the Pro Bowl, and he got a contract extension for another couple seasons and a nice payday. So they've got Geno Smith. Now, he's not anywhere close to, 35, 40, $50 million. He's more in the $20, $25 million, which is still, that's great. But just by the fact that he doesn't have such an enormous quarterback salary, they can afford to pay players at other positions and make their team more well-rounded. So if you look at the Seahawks, they don't have somebody that has 15% of the total salary cap. They've got more people at 8%, 6%, 4%, 3% of the salary cap. They've got a number of players who are around $10 million per year, but not too much over that. And then you've got a cluster of people between $8 million, $5 million, $4 million, $3 million per year. So you've got a bunch of players who are getting a good payday, but nobody's got a huge astronomical salary that's making it hard to really build a complete roster. It's funny, if you look at the Seahawks, even their punter and their kicker are making $3 million a year. So probably some of the highest paid special teams players in the league, but that's the way they have constructed their roster. It's not just 1 or 2 players at the top, like a wide receiver or quarterback, who are taking up everything. They got it spread out to punter, kicker, tight end, safety, all these different positions. So it's just a different philosophy of constructing the team. It's more about the team than stars. Taking a look at the injury report for these two teams. For the Bengals, the only player who's definitely out is Akeem Davis-Gaither. He's been battling a knee injury the past few weeks. He didn't practice all week. He's out. We saw Josh Tupou pop up on the injury report late Friday. Did not practice because of a toe injury, so that's going to be interesting if he's going to be able to go or not, because he's really the only backup nose tackle they have behind DJ Reader. DJ Reader is good because he can't play every snap, so they might have to bring up Dominique Davis from the practice squad. I'm not sure what they would do if Josh Tupou isn't able to go, but the important thing is T. Higgins, wide receiver, he'd been battling a fractured rib that he got against Tennessee. He sat out the game at Arizona just to give it some time to heal up, but it's really, a fractured rib isn't going to heal in just a couple weeks, so it's going to be one of those things he's going to have to deal with the pain and see if he can be somewhat comfortable while he's out there playing. He may have to wear a flak jacket to protect those ribs a little bit, make sure he doesn't get hit in the ribs. That would be extremely painful, I'm sure. But T practiced pretty much all week. He was limited Wednesday, Thursday, and got a full practice Friday. It's looking like T is probably going to be able to go, and that's going to be a big help for the Bengals. Even though Trenton Irwin did step up and have a big game last week, and Andre Iosivas did his part, having T out there on the field is just going to make the Seattle Seahawks defense have to work that much harder to guard him, because he's a physical force out there. He's not quite a DK Metcalf, but pretty solid. The other one to watch for the Bengals is Chidobe Awuzie. He was out last week with a back injury. He did not practice Wednesday, but he was limited Thursday and Friday. He's going to be questionable, so we're going to have to see Saturday, and going into the game, Chido may be a game time decision. Myles Murphy didn't practice at all this week, but not because of injury. They didn't say, some kind of personal reasons, but doesn't have any kind of injury designation for the game, so he should be available to play in the game, we would think. He may be a healthy scratch. We don't know anything about it, but hopefully everything works out. If it's something, you don't want to speculate about what personal issues someone might have, but people got to take care of their personal issues and got to give them time to do that. So you got to do what you got to do. Hopefully it's nothing serious that would, impact him beyond this week. But overall, Bengals are pretty healthy. On the Seahawks side, they're a little bit more banged up, although they are coming off of their bye. So a lot of players that were injured or had some little nagging injuries, they should have had extra time to heal up in that bye week. Most importantly was Geno Smith, their quarterback, number 7. Geno, in that Monday night game against the Giants, he got kind of tackled awkwardly out of bounds. It wasn't an illegal hit, but he had an issue with it. He felt like it was kind of maybe close to a horse collar tackle or something, but Isaiah Simmons from the Giants just kind of landed on the back of Geno's legs on the sidelines. And so Geno, I think maybe his knee got twisted up, but he's been practicing all week. He's good to go. Maybe one of the big things for the Seahawks is to get back their left tackle, Charles Cross. He was their first-round pick from 2022, and he had a toe injury that kept him out since week 1. He has not played past 3 games. So he was limited on Wednesday, full practice on Thursday, Friday. He's going to be good to go for the Seahawks. Also, their left guard, Phil Haynes, he had a calf injury that kept him limited early in the week, but he was able to get a full practice on Friday. Pete Carrolls said in his interview that he is going to play in the game. Jamal Adams used to play for the Jets, so when he went back to play the Giants at MetLife Stadium, there's a lot of hoopla and hype surrounding that. He was in for a total of 9 plays, and unfortunately, he got a concussion. He went to tackle Daniel Jones and put his head down. That's the cardinal sin you don't want to do as a defender, is drop your head, because that's when you can get neck injuries, head injuries, all kinds of bad stuff happens. See what you hit, they say. But in this case, Jamal Adams tried to go in with his head first, got a knee to the side of his head from Daniel Jones, knocked him out. Not quite cold, but he was looking pretty loopy out there. He was not able to stand up. They got him off, took him into the blue tent, examined him, and said, "You're done for the game." Then he tried to get into a fight with the doctor who told him he had a concussion. He apologized the next day. He was like, obviously I had a concussion, so don't hold it against me. But not a good look. You see a guy arguing with a doctor about whether or not you have a concussion. Anyway, he's going to play in the game. So Jamal Adams, back from a concussion, ready to play against the Bengals. That's great. DK Metcalf, their wide receiver, number 14, it looked like a fractured rib because he got hit in the back against the Lions in week 2 very hard, and I wouldn't be surprised if he fractured multiple ribs. So DK Metcalf has just been resting all season pretty much and playing in the game. So he didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday, practice Friday. He's going to play in the game. Two people who are not going to play for the Seahawks are Kobe Bryant and Artie Burns. They're two cornerbacks. Now, Kobe Bryant is obviously not the basketball player Kobe Bryant, but he is a player who went to the University of Cincinnati with Sauce Gardner, and he was drafted by the Seahawks in the 4th round. So a familiar name to some Cincinnati fans. Artie Burns is also familiar to the Bengals because he used to play for the Steelers. Artie Burns was drafted by Pittsburgh not too long ago. Now he's with the Seahawks, so he's familiar with the Bengals somewhat. Also, Seahawks right guard Damian Lewis, he's got an ankle injury. He's looking doubtful. Seahawks have quite a few more players listed on their injury report, but overall, because of the bye week rest, most of them should be able to play. Both of these teams are relatively healthy heading into this game. Let's do a quick scouting report of the Seattle Seahawks. Now, we know the head coach, longtime coach, Pete Carroll, he's got 28 years of NFL experience and 19 years in college, so he's been coaching close to 50 years. He's, if not the oldest, one of the oldest coaches in the, I don't know if between him and Belichick, which one is older. Probably Pete Carroll. He's in his 70s for sure, but he doesn't look it at all. He's still got tons of energy. If you see him on the sidelines, he's bouncing up and down, chewing that big wad of gum he's got. He's got like a baseball-sized wad of gum in his mouth every week, and he's working the officials, yucking it up with the players, having a good time. They say, the saying goes, if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. It doesn't look like Pete Carroll has ever worked a day in his life. He always looks like he's happy out there. Maybe that's why he looks so young, because he's just having the time of his life out there coaching football. That's what we all need to strive for, apparently. But they got Pete Carroll, great coach, winning coach. All his players respect him. And that's one of the things when you hear about the Bengals, they talk about culture and how Zach Taylor has brought in this culture and the culture is so good and blah, blah, blah. Culture this, culture that. The Seahawks are a team, in addition to the Patriots, another one like Belichick, where I'd say they're famous for their culture, just as a team, as an organization. You'd say, point to Seattle Seahawks as a team of culture. New England Patriots, famous for their culture. Bengals, I think we'll see. I think every team says they have great culture. Like if you go and watch any of these other teams' videos, like all of them say what a great culture they have. The culture we're building here, so special. Everybody is amazing. Number one, it's way easier to have good culture when you're winning, you're going to the Super Bowl, you're going to the playoffs, AFC championships. Way easier to have good culture. Number two, I don't know. I've never been in a NFL locker room with all the players, but I would imagine if you've got a bunch of guys who are getting paid millions of dollars, the mood should be pretty good. Like I don't, hang out with a bunch of millionaires, and that's not really the lifestyle I live. But if I had like 25 other guys I was hanging out with and we were all millionaires, like, don't you think the culture would be pretty good? Like, why would anybody be like upset all the time? Like, oh man, like I just got all this money, I don't know what to do with it. Damn. Like, no, of course the culture is going to be good. Like everybody's happy, they don't have a care in the world. The team takes care of all their food, their clothes, their schedule. It tells them everything to do. Like, why would the culture be bad? Like, if the player didn't want to be there, they would just get him out of the building, cut him off the team, and then you wouldn't have a culture issue. They would just get somebody else in here who is going to have a smile on their face and likes making hundreds of thousands of dollars. Anyway, Seahawks, they probably have good culture. In terms of Seattle's offense, it's interesting that neither one of these teams has an especially highly ranked, high-powered offense, even though they have great players. That's the thing that's different about the Seahawks than the Cardinals. Like, with the Cardinals, I mentioned you'd be hard-pressed to find a lot of stars on the Cardinals. Like, I barely recognize any of the players' names on the Cardinals at all. You will not have that problem on the Seahawks. The Seahawks are loaded with talent. They are loaded with stars. You can't throw a rock without hitting somebody who's a first round or a second round talent on the Seahawks. So there is talent out the wazoo on the Seahawks. I'm not sure where to start with the Seahawks on offense. Let's say quarterback, because that's boring. Let's go quarterback number 7, Geno Smith. He's been in the league for 11 seasons out of West Virginia. He, as you may have remembered, he was with the Jets, had an incident where he got punched by a teammate and broke his jaw before the start of the season and got replaced by Ryan Fitzpatrick. That kind of derailed Geno's career after that. He got kind of a rough start with the Jets anyway, but that was definitely the nail in the coffin for the Jets. But the biggest thing about Geno is his accuracy, timing, and being able to run the offense efficiently. His reason he got to the Pro Bowl last year, I think he was at the top of the league in completion percentage. He was over 70%. If he wasn't number one, he was in the top 3. But one of the more accurate passers in the NFL last year. He's not going to be exceptionally mobile because he's 33 years old. So he's still got some mobility, but not like he used to have, obviously. His thing is going to be more getting the ball where it needs to be, on time, in rhythm. He's got plenty of arm still. He's always had one of the strongest arms in the NFL. And you add on top of that the accuracy, the timing, and his wisdom of being around offenses for so long in the NFL. Everything seems like it's coming together for Geno at this point in his career. We'll have to see if he's able to take advantage of some of those weapons he's got. And the Seattle skill players are second to none. I know Bengals fans, we want to say that we've got some of the best skill position talent in the NFL, but if I had to be honest, as a group, as a whole, I would probably pick Seattle over the Bengals. Just because, let's get to them, they've got wide receiver number 14, DK Metcalf. Okay, he is got to be the most physically imposing wide receiver in the NFL today. I can't really think of any who is bigger, stronger, faster, more physical than DK Metcalf. I mean, if you think about when they were coming out in the draft, they had the picture of DK Metcalf standing next to A.J. Brown. And A.J. Brown is one of the top receivers in the league. He plays for the Eagles, was with the Titans. But, I mean, he is a physical specimen in himself. And he looked tiny compared to DK Metcalf. I mean, I'm trying to think of, like, who else would be even comparable to him. I can't think of anybody. Maybe a tight end. It would have to be a tight end like Kyle Pitts for the Falcons, maybe. Or not Drake London. Like, Drake London for the Falcons isn't big enough. I'm sure, like, there's nobody else. Like, T. Higgins is like a little twig compared to DK Metcalf. T. Higgins is, the biggest receiver that the Bengals have, and he's not anything compared to DK Metcalf. But the thing about DK is, despite his physicality, he doesn't necessarily have the best ball skills in terms of, like, catching, getting separation when he's running his routes. Like, he can run really fast in a straight line, but he's so big when it comes to making breaks and cuts out of his routes and, stopping, planting, doing a 90-degree turn and getting away from the guy. He's not quite as good as that. So defenders are able to stick near him, stay around him, but it's just that he can kind of out-physical those guys, even if they are right next to him. DK Metcalf is strong enough to just take the ball away from them most of the time. It doesn't matter. Kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, then they have their other wide receiver, number 16, Tyler Lockett. He's a smaller guy, but he's got excellent ball skills. He's made some of the best catches, toe tap grabs, over-the-shoulder grabs, even though he doesn't necessarily have the best speed or the best size or quickness or anything like that. He's one of those guys who he can just get open, get separation, has good hands, good body control, does all those things very well without necessarily having the most elite athleticism. And then the third guy in their receiving core, number 11, the rookie, Jackson Smith-Njigba out of Ohio State. That name's familiar to me just because I watch the Buckeyes all the time, but he is coming along. He had a wrist injury that required surgery during the preseason, so that may have slowed him down at the beginning a little bit, but one of the things that people said about him was that he was more talented and a better wide receiver coming out of Ohio State than Chris Olave for the Saints or Garrett Wilson for the Jets. And that's saying a lot because both of those guys were in the competition or in consideration for Offensive Rookie of the Year last year. Garrett Wilson actually won the award. It remains to be seen whether Jackson Smith and Jigba can live up to that hype and that potential, but he did have quite a stellar college career, and he looked pretty good in the preseason. We'll have to see if the Bengals are able to cover him. And he works mostly out of the slot. He's a smaller receiver, not the fastest guy, but he's got the quickness and the body control and the hands to make it work out of the slot. And on top of that, number 87, their tight end, Noah Fant, he's got the athleticism and the size that none of the Bengals tight ends have. He almost had a touchdown against the Giants. We had a real long catch and run up the sidelines. He was tiptoeing up the sidelines, able to stay in bounds, and just got down short of scoring a touchdown. But he's got a lot of receiving yards. He's their number 2 receiver for this season behind DK Metcalf. So they've got a tight end receiving threat. Again, Bengals don't have that. And then if you look at the Seahawks running backs, number 9, Kenneth Walker, he's in his second year out of Michigan State. He is a hard-running, but very fast, very patient runner. He's very different than watching Joe Mixon. The thing that I get frustrated watching Joe Mixon is it seems like he doesn't have the vision to bounce the runs outside if there's a crease. He'll just run straight up into the back of his offensive lineman and just try to push them forward and try to get 3 yards, 4 yards, whatever it is. But he never tries to break that home run for the touchdown. Kenneth Walker is almost the opposite. He doesn't really try to get up in there, stick his nose in the pile, and get the straight ahead 3 or 4 yards. He's always looking to bounce it outside, always looking for that little crease, that opening where he could take it for a touchdown all the way because he has the speed. Unlike Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker has the speed to outrun everybody to the end zone. So he's always looking for that opportunity, and hopefully the Bengals don't give it to him. That's the thing that the Bengals need to pay attention to is don't let Kenneth Walker bust out, because I know he can do it. I can just imagine if he gets behind the safeties, he's gone. So they need to control Kenneth Walker, bottle him up at the line of scrimmage. Don't let him break out for that home run that he's looking for. Then as a change of pace, the Seahawks also have a rookie, Zach Charbonnet from UCLA. He doesn't get a lot of snaps yet, but what he has done in the preseason and the season so far is look promising. He looks like a good runner. He's got good moves, good vision. So if he gets more snaps, people were thinking he was going to challenge for the starting job as a rookie right away. But Kenneth Walker's, put a stop to that immediately. He's obviously got that position solidified. But Zach Charbonnet is a good change of pace, maybe third down back, or just if Kenneth Walker needs a break, they've got a good backup coming in. Something that the Bengals, again, do not have. They got Joe Mixon, but then behind that, they got Travion Williams. Zach Charbonnet is better than Travion Williams or whoever else they have. Chase Brown. And I mentioned in the injuries, their left tackle, Charles Cross, number 67. He is supposed to play in this game, and he's going to be battling up against Bengals right defensive end, Trey Hendrickson. That's going to be a big matchup to watch, whether Cross, the Seahawks first-round pick, number 9 overall in 2022, is able to handle Trey Hendrickson, or if Hendrickson is able to keep up his blistering pace he's been on so far this season. He's leading the Bengals in sacks, and he's at the top of the league in terms of sacks, quarterback pressures, hits, all that stuff. He's been dominating left tackles every game. That's going to be an interesting matchup to watch all day, as well as just Seattle's interior offensive line against the Bengals' interior defensive line. We don't know yet who is going to play for Seattle, but whoever it is, the Seahawks' interior defensive line has been pretty effective in terms of pass blocking and run blocking win rates. The interior of the Seahawks has been pretty strong. That's more so than their tackles, because they've basically been playing with 2 backup tackles all season on the outside of their offensive line. So the inside of their offensive line has been stronger. And that's going to be interesting to see if they're able to get the run game going on the Bengals defense, because that's been kind of the Achilles heel. The Bengals are giving up like 145 yards rushing per game. Even to the Cardinals, they gave up over 140 yards of rushing. I'm sure the Seahawks are going to be well aware of that and try to push that number up even further. I'd watch for the Seahawks to try to get over 150 yards of rushing in this game. And that's where the depth is going to be a question for the Bengals. Like I said, DJ Reader and BJ Hill, they're going to be good. It's going to be a tough matchup to go against the Seahawks interior linemen. But then what about Josh Tupou? Is he going to be there to come in and take some of those snaps, or are they going to have to bring somebody else up off the practice squad? Whoever it is, they're going to need somebody to go up against those Seattle guards and centers. But overall, I think the Bengals defense matches up pretty well against the Seahawks offense. I don't know. Like I said, the Seahawks, they got a lot of good players, but the results haven't been that great so far this year. I don't know why that is necessarily. Maybe they just haven't found the right game plan, the right scheme, gotten the right rhythm, or whatever it is. But they've got talent. They just haven't produced very much on the field. But I mean, I guess they produced enough to win the games. That's all you really need. So it doesn't matter if they're scoring 50 points and 500 yards every game. Is they're 3-1. That's really all they need to do. We're going to have to see. Another thing is the tackling. We know that the Bengals have struggled with missed tackles the last couple weeks. And Kenneth Walker is not easy to tackle. DK Metcalf is not easy to tackle. Noah Fant, the tight end, is not going to be an easy guy to tackle. So Bengals defense, whatever they got to do, they better figure out the tackling and make it much better in this game. One other thing to note is that the Seahawks, through 4 games, have only committed 1 turnover and no fumbles. They have 1 interception. Not only did they not lose any fumbles, they didn't even commit a single fumble. So it's going to be a challenge for the Bengals defense to try to get a turnover. That's part of the reason why the Bengals have won any games, is because they're positive in the turnover differential. They are +6 in terms of getting more turnovers than they've given away. Against the Cardinals, they had 1 interception that the Bengals gave away, but they got 3 turnovers, and almost 4 if you count turnover on downs. That would be a 4th turnover. But the Bengals, they won the turnover margin against the Cardinals 3-1, and they ended up winning the game handily. And that could be a big reason why the Seahawks are 3-1 also, is because they have a huge positive turnover differential. They don't turn the ball over, means they hold on the ball, they get more possessions than the other team, they can score more points than the other team. And part of that may come down to pressuring Geno Smith. So if Hendrickson can put some pressure on Geno Smith, maybe that will make him throw an inaccurate throw, and one of the Bengals defensive backs can jump in there and get the interception. It really comes down to matchups, not just in this game, but in every game. And one of the things I forgot to mention last week was teams take advantage of matchups on a play-to-play basis. If they see one player go out, they'll attack that player's sub almost immediately. And that was what happened against the Cardinals last week, where DJ Turner, number 20, the rookie cornerback, he was in for one play, and he broke up a pass, and then he had to come out of the game. It looked like he dislocated his finger. Just the way that the trainers were holding his hand, and you could see the trainer was literally yanking on DJ Turner's finger as they're walking off the field, trying to get it to be back in place or undislocated or whatever, but pop it back in. On that one play where he had to come out with a dislocated finger, that's where the Cardinals scored their touchdown. Hollywood Brown ran the slot fade route over Jalen Davis. And, nothing Jalen Davis could do. Like, that's your job. Come in off the bench cold and guard one of the top receivers in the game. But that's what happened. Cardinals was like, oh, here's this guy. He's just got in the game. Let's go after him. Touchdown. That's what NFL teams do. Smart, well-coached teams do. So we're going to have to see, for example, if DJ Reader or BJ Hill goes out and they have to bring in Josh Tupou or whoever Josh Tupou's replacement is. If it's Dominique Davis, I would expect the Seahawks to say, oh, that guy is a practice squad guy. We're going to go after him. On the defensive side, the Seahawks are no slouches either. I don't even know where to start with these guys. Let's start with the safeties at the back end of the defense. Number 6, Quandre Diggs in his 9th year out of Texas. And number 33, Jamal Adams. Mentioned him earlier. So those are the top 2 highest paid players on their defense, are their 2 safeties. And they both play ball hawking safeties, but they're also in the box making tackles. They're very versatile. They can blitz, they can cover, they can stop the run, they can do all kinds of things. On the outside, they're 2 corners, and they kind of rotate different guys in. They'll rotate. Julian Love is another safety. He's actually their top tackler on the team this year. So they've got 3 safeties and multiple cornerbacks that they can kind of use just based on what package they want to use, what kind of coverage. If they want to have 3 safeties, 2 corners, 3 corners, 2 safeties, how many linebackers, etc. So they have a bunch of versatile different players. They have got Devin Witherspoon is, I guess you'd call him a cornerback. He can move outside or inside and play more of a nickel safety hybrid kind of role, like a Tiki or Rondé Barber kind of role. He had a pick 6 of Daniel Jones, and he was their first round draft pick this past season in 2023. Now, these reporters in the NFL are so thirsty for any kind of a story, anything that could be possibly potentially construed as controversial or bulletin board material or whatever. Like DK Metcalf, the receiver for the Seahawks, they asked him about Jamar Chase's record-breaking day and how good he was. And DK said, yeah, Jamar Chase had an amazing day. He's really good. But I think Witherspoon will get the best of him. Like just basically saying like, yeah, I think my guy will come out on top. And the reporters like ran to Jamar Chase like, oh my God, did you hear what DK Metcalf said about you? Blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't understand, why would anybody care? It's not like DK Metcalf plays defense. And of course, he's going to say, my teammate is going to do a good job. Like, why would he say, I think my teammate is going to lose against Jamar Chase? Of course, he's going to support his teammate. So this just shows you how desperate these reporters are for anything to report on instead of the actual football game. You know, some of these people, whatever, I won't go into it, but like they spend so much time reporting on things outside of the actual game of football, but when the games actually come up, they barely even talk about it at all. It's like, what's the point of that? They would rather talk about anything but the game. Anyway, so the Seahawks defensive backs are strong. They've got Reek Woolen, number 27. He was a Pro Bowl. I don't think he was all pro, but he was Pro Bowl as a rookie. Led the NFL in interceptions as a rookie. He is a athletic freak. He's like 6'4", runs 4.26 in the 40-yard dash. He's kind of like I guess it's a lazy comparison to say he's like a faster Sauce Gardner, because they're not really the same. I know Sauce Gardner is he's a unique player in himself, but Reek Woolen, he's got the size of Sauce Gardner, but just faster, basically. And at the other corner, they got a guy named Michael Jackson. So they got Michael Jackson, Reek Woolen, and Devin Witherspoon are their 3 corners or outside corners. So those guys match up pretty well against the Bengals receivers. It's going to be interesting to see if Jamar Chase can get open. Like he says, it doesn't matter who's guarding him, what the play call is. He's always open regardless. And I'm sure the Seahawks are going to take that as a challenge. They see him catching 15 passes against the Cardinals, and they're going to say, okay, well, that's not going to happen to us. We're going to do whatever we need to do to make sure that Jamar Chase is doubled, triple covered every play, and especially if they're down on the goal line, keep our eyes on number 1. Don't let him score 3 touchdowns against us like the Cardinals. And they had an extra week, the bye week, the Seahawks did, to prepare for this and watch this and get fully amped up to play. So I'm sure Seahawks, and the thing about the Seahawks is there's some stat going around about how the Seahawks are 16-4 in their last 5 years of playing on the East Coast at 1 o'clock games. So it's not like the Seahawks are going to have that kind of jet lag where they come out and the West Coast team and play the early game and their bodies are still kind of on the early time. No, the Seahawks are coming out 3 days, either they're coming out Thursday or Friday. So they're going to be here plenty in advance to get ready to go. Now the Bengals, they are also unique in that they have won their last 6 games in a row against NFC conference opponents. That is the second longest streak in the NFL. The Eagles have won their last 8 games against AFC opponents. In terms of AFC teams, Bengals have the lead with 6 straight wins over NFC teams. That's going to be interesting to see if the Bengals are able to keep that streak alive against the Seahawks. For the Seahawks in the middle, they've got All-Pro Bowler Bobby Wagner. He's in his 12th season. He was a longtime player for the Seahawks. Then he was with the Rams last year, then came back to the Seahawks after that absence. So the Seahawks welcome him back with open arms. He's their middle linebacker, heart of the defense. He's number 54. They also have number 56, Jordan Brooks, who was a former first-round pick 4 years ago. He's been playing really well. He's one of their top tacklers this season. Got 2 sacks also. And then the Seahawks have a number of defensive linemen who can get to the passer. You've got Uchenna Nwosu, Boye Mafe. Jerron Reed has been a long-time stud. Jerron Reed is one of their top paid defensive interior linemen. He's defensive tackle. He's number 90. So in terms of interior defensive linemen coming up the middle, watch number 90. And then they got number 10 coming off the edge. That's Nwosu. The Seahawks have a number of pass rushers, but I wouldn't call any of the Seahawks pass rushers elite or especially dominant like a Trey Hendrickson or something like that. But they have a lot of different guys who can get to the quarterback at different times. So that is obviously going to be a challenge for the Bengals offensive line, for their running backs, and for Joe Burrow to see if he is able to escape the pressure that is inevitably going to come. You can't expect your offensive line to perfectly block every player from the defense on every play. It's the NFL. They get paid money too, so sometimes they're going to win their matchups as well. So it's going to be up to Joe Burrow to escape that or make a quick decision to get rid of the ball before he can get sacked. On the special teams side, the Seahawks, actually, they may have somewhat of the advantage. I'd say they definitely have the advantage from the punter. Michael Dixon, the punter for the Seahawks, is probably the best punter in the NFL. If you watch their punter, he has not only some of the longest punts in the league, but his form, the way that he catches the ball and kicks it all so quickly and efficiently and in such a compact motion. It's like he has perfected the art of punting. I've never seen another punter catch it and kick it so quickly and consistently as Michael Dixon. And that's why I think he's the highest paid punter in the NFL. So it's not a surprise. So if you want to watch good punting, watch the Seahawks punter. And hopefully he's punting a lot, which means the defense is getting a lot of stops. Seahawks field goal kicker is Jason Myers. He has been in the league a long time. I would probably say the Bengals have the edge on a place kicking perspective, but it's tough to call on that one. Seahawks do have DJ Dallas as their returner for punts and kicks. Off the top of my head, I know that name is familiar. I want to say he may have taken a few kick returns back for touchdowns, so let's just assume that he's going to be pretty dangerous. We'll have to keep an eye on him. Now, the Bengals have Trent Irwin out there as a punt returner. He had a 28-yard return himself last week, so nothing to scoff at. Hopefully, the Bengals are able to get a win and get their record back to 500, 3-3. That would be a good way to go into their bye week at 3-3, 500, feeling like they're still right in the thick of things. It doesn't kill the season if they lose this game, but obviously 3-3 sounds a lot better than 2-4. All right, let's get to the Week 6 game picks, all the games straight up. Now, the Chiefs already took care of the Broncos on Thursday Night Football. I'm going to say I was going to pick the Chiefs. Come on. You knew I was going to pick the Chiefs over the Broncos. But getting to the Sunday games, the Ravens against the Titans in London. I'm going to take the Ravens for many reasons, but they went over early. Titans went over like a couple days in advance. Ravens went over like 5 or 6 days in advance. So I'm going to say having all that extra time to get acclimated to the different time zones, Ravens are going to come out on top in London. Going to the 1 o'clock game, Washington Commanders at the Atlanta Falcons. I'm going to take the Falcons. Vikings at the Bears. Both these teams are 1-4, but Justin Jefferson is on the IR for the Vikings with a hamstring injury. So I'm going to go Bears just because the Bears got it going a little bit against the Commanders. Maybe they'll keep it going against the Vikings. Now, Seahawks at Bengals. Bengals are favored by 3 in this game, which is interesting to me. I guess they're the home team, so that's kind of like saying on a neutral site, the two teams would be even. If I bet with my heart, I'm saying Bengals. If I bet with my head, I'm saying Seahawks. I gotta say Seahawks in this one. Seahawks, they get the better record, and just on paper, I think that their skill players look better. Just like overall depth, like their wide receiver, tight end, running back positions, they just have more skill. And their offensive line, I think, is probably better than the Bengals, like interior especially. Like they don't have Cordell Volson on their team, so I hope I'm wrong, but I'm gonna pick the Seahawks in this one. It pains me to say that, but I'm going to pick the Seahawks. All right, let's move on quickly from that one. 49ers, Browns. 49ers are going to blow the Browns away because Deshaun Watson is not playing in that game. PJ Walker is going to make his first start. It was a tough spot for Browns rookie Dorian Thompson-Robinson to have his first start. He didn't do very well at all, so they're starting PJ Walker instead. See how that goes, but 49ers are still going to dominate. Doesn't matter who plays. Panthers at Dolphins. I'm picking the Panthers. Sorry, I'm picking the Dolphins. What am I talking about? Panthers aren't going to win. Panthers are 0-5. They're playing one of the best teams in the league. Give me the Dolphins. Jaguars at the Colts. This is interesting because Colts have seemed to have almost more success with Gardner Minshew than Anthony Richardson at quarterback. But I'm going to say the Jaguars pull it off at home. Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Calvin Ridley, Travis Etienne, they're all looking good for the Jaguars. I'm going to go Jaguars at home. Saints at Texans. CJ Stroud's looking good, but Saints, they smashed New England in New England, 34-0. I mean, that was pretty convincing. So let's go Saints. The away team, they're 3-2. Let's go Saints. Now, Patriots at Raiders. Patriots 1-4, Raiders 2-3. I got to go Raiders just because the Patriots have looked so awful the last 2 weeks. They've gotten beat, 38-3 and then 34-0. So that's Patriots are looking horrible. Bill Belichick, this may be his last year. We'll see. Cardinals at the Rams. I'm going to go Rams in that one. Cardinals didn't show us too much last week. The Rams were at least a little bit more competitive. Eagles at Jets. I'm going to go Eagles without a doubt in that one. Lions at Buccaneers. Both teams only have one win. Lions are 4-1. Buccaneers are 3-1. Even though they're at home, I think Mike Evans is questionable. He may have a hamstring issue. I don't know. Do we really believe in Baker Mayfield? No, I don't think so. Let's go Lions in that one. Then Sunday, oh God, the Giants again on prime time? Bills. Giants at Bills. I'm going Bills in that one. Bills are actually favored by 15 points, so good luck, Giants. Monday Night Football, we got Cowboys at Chargers. It's going to be an interesting matchup. Chargers are the home team. Cowboys, they got off to a hot start, but then kind of stumbled recently. Oh, wait, they don't have Austin Eckler on the Chargers, though. I was going to say, this is the thing, is these injuries skew these games so much back and forth. I was going to say Chargers. Let's go Chargers. You know what? I've lost confidence in the Cowboys after they got beat by the 49ers so bad. Let's go Chargers. Keep this thing rolling. It's going to be another big week of football. 15 games. Last week, I was 8 correct out of 14. So 14 games last week. I got 8 of them right. Barely over 500%. So still, it's not easy. Even though I'm not picking against the spread, it's hard to pick these games. Just any given Sunday, like they say. Hopefully that gets you all pumped up and ready to go and excited for this game. It's going to be a big matchup, big measuring stick game to see which team is for real. Again, we kind of said that for the game with the Titans, and the Titans showed that they were maybe a little bit more for real than the Bengals on that day. So this is another game, another chance. Every week's a new chance to go 1-0. So Bengals got to get out there and show the world that they're back. Joe Burrow's back. Bengals are back. Jamar Chase and all those guys are right back to where they were, going to the Super Bowl again. So join us next time for episode 17, where we do the recap of the Seahawks versus the Bengals game. Hopefully you'll be recapping a Bengals win. But until that time, I'm going to leave you with a hoo-day and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.